2020 is a year that everyone will remember for the rest of their lives, and the fitness industry has been at the forefront of things affected by this pandemic. But the resilience of the IFBB has been something else to watch. It's amazing how many athletes came together and even out of retirement to put on a show for the fans. The results for each 2020 Olympia men's class turned out to be just as unpredictable as the year has been, and fans will probably remember it for the rest of their lives as well. The 212 division wrapped up late on Friday night. There were a lot of questions here and even more answers. The first one to be asked was what happens when the worlds of Classic and 212 collide. How would George Peterson fare now that he's no longer on that third place island he was stuck on in Classic? Would Derek Lunsford dial it in? And would Kamal's pipeline to the fountain of youth finally run out of water? We'll start with Lunsford, who managed to come in off. Again, he just can't get that fullness and leanness needed to hang with the rest of the field in his upper body. And it's kind of odd where he gets shredded and where he doesn't. This might stem from a problem with the weight cap for him, so look for him to move up in the next year or two. People are already calling for it, and he's going to fade into obscurity pretty quickly if he doesn't change things up somehow. Many feel he was lucky to get fourth here. So that left room for George Bull to move up into third place, where he seems to be stuck on an island from the rest of the field. Yet again. You wonder if he ever gets sick of this crap. But he actually seems to have been beaten a tad on his conditioning this time, and his leg thickness from the side probably held him back a little. You know people are going to call for him to move up into the open, but he needs more time to settle into his new home. He's in a very good position for the future of the division right now, and should let things sort themselves out first. Sean Clarita was the talk of the show, coming in at an all-time best. This is a look that will always invoke nostalgia for him. It's crazy how well he carries 180 pounds on his tiny frame, as there's female bodybuilders bigger than him. And he pushed Elgargni, who a week ago looked to be unstoppable. But Elgargni was no pushover himself. The fact that he improved from last year at 49 years old is simply unheard of in this sport. His muscle maturity, conditioning, and granular density impugn everything we've learned about the human body. But it wasn't enough for him to repeat, making Clarita your new 212 champion. It's going to be interesting if he decides to come back next year. He'd actually be able to use his time machine and compete again at 49. The battle for the last 2021 invitation was close as well. Now this appeared to be a battle between the former Arnold Classic winner and two-time runner-up Ahmad Ashkenani and the red-hot Angel Calderon Frias, who won 4 straight shows going into here. Ahmad's legs were down a little from years past, but his upper body can still hang with the best, and in the end it was Ahmad who gets another season off. And Angel ended up falling to 7th. A guy by the name of Ole Krivy, who wasn't even on my competitor list, snuck in as 6th. The narrative for next year is going to be exciting as well, as it could be wide open yet again. And this isn't the knock against Clarita. He still has the highest ceiling, but came in at a once-in-a-lifetime conditioning standard. And he supposedly gained 7 pounds from last year, so a few more and he could be unstoppable. The ever-growing Classic Physique division didn't start until Saturday morning. The amount of talent circulating in and out of this division is unbelievable. Having over 30 competitors just seems too cumbersome for a competition, but when you look at their physiques, you can't pick out any that don't belong. The IFBB definitely faces a conundrum here, but it's a good problem to have. And things seem to transpire better than expected. A lot of the hype names came on strong and fared pretty well, but there's always going to be X factors you can't anticipate going into this contest. Wesley Vissers looks incredible but was kept out of the top 10. His quads are surprisingly good for a taller guy. It's his hammies and wide waist that seem to hold him back. Many people don't realize how hard it is for a taller guy to pull this off, and it's great to see a division he can fit in, although I'd like to see a way for him to do better. The sad truth many don't realize is that Arnold probably wouldn't have been very successful as a Classic Physique competitor, as he has very similar strengths and weaknesses to Wesley. Despite all the talk behind him, Logan Franklin struggled to break into the top 10, but was able to do so. The hyping and bloviating doesn't look good in retrospect, and it may stunt any around him in the near future, and this was self-inflicted to some degree, but his move up into Classic from Physique was definitely the right call. His legs are solid and will be useful in taking people's attention away from some of his weak points. Many in the know expected Danny Yunin to break into the top 5 of this contest, and he almost pulled it off. His 6th place isn't anything to scoff at, and it's just a matter of time before he develops enough granularity to be able to do so. Brian Jones was your breakout star of this contest. He proved that Chris's height in the division isn't an anomaly. The way he can flick his entire body to one side looks like something you can bend in Microsoft Paint. A lot of fans saw this one coming too after he won the Chicago Pro earlier, which I think is interesting because the classic fans tend to be very good at predicting where things are headed. Alex Cambronero came in at 4th place. This was probably a disappointment for him after he's beaten just about everyone except for the top 2, but it was almost unanimous he'd finish here in just about every prediction I saw. The fact is that Terrence Ruffin has never fallen on the good side of the judging, and it had finally boiled over enough that they couldn't ignore him anymore. Many feel he's been overlooked in the past, and I would actually agree with that. Just about everyone had him finally taking 3rd place, and just about everybody was wrong. Breon Ansley was pushed out of 2nd in the finals and placed on Peterson's vacated 3rd place island. He's got a difficult decision ahead of him, and I'm not sure there's a good answer. Many will call for him to move up into 212, but that could very well be a mistake as he didn't fare very well there earlier. The guy has an absolute incredible build that should be rewarded, and he is still one of the faces of this division going forward. Terrence Ruffin managed to sneak into 2nd place, and it may have actually helped Bumstead. The 2 shorter guys helped him look enormous everywhere due to the height disparity between them, but Rough Diesel is a guy that deserved every bit of this and then some. He's never complained once to my knowledge after a contest despite many people crying foul. He's the guy that quietly licks his wounds, goes back to the drawing board, and tries to find ways to improve. And you won't hear anyone suggest he move up into 212 even though he'd probably do pretty well there. His physique and posing style scream classic so much that the division itself will evolve better with him in it. Bumstead won another one as many expected, and the guy doesn't seem to know what the word complacency means as he improved his back so much that he arguably beat Breon in the back double by. How he pulled that off while still remaining the same weight defies anyone's logic. It's hard to say how long he's going to be this dominant. He's still very young but has that autoimmune disease that could complicate things. He seems to take his health very seriously, which could cause him to end his career early to better keep an eye on it or enough to keep it in check to compete for a long time. Either way, fans need to enjoy his reign while it lasts and not take it for granted. I don't think I've seen someone more marketable and inspirational on the scene in quite a long time. Finally, we arrive at the marquee event of men's open bodybuilding, and holy cow, this was a barn burner. It began exactly the way the consensus pictured it. Phil wasn't 100% and still had spillover from his stomach, but was still able to go toe-to-toe with Brandon and his slightly improved legs. At least that's what seemed to pan out for the first 10 minutes or so. Just as Phil was getting comfortable in his shoes and began harassing Curry for his legs, something all but forgotten in the annals of bodybuilding unleashed his new monster onto the scene. This something was Chad Nichols, for those not familiar with the history, and he reminded everyone, including myself, why he prepped almost all of the big names back in the 90s. This was the man responsible for changing both worlds of bodybuilding in his time with 2 athletes, and he may have just given us a 3rd one with Big Rami 20 years later. And Rami posed as if he was possessed, and it seemed to work as he got better and better as time wore on. He eventually found himself in the middle of the first call out. The judges slowly moved him to the center and then rotated the competitors around him like a helicopter blade, yet nobody was able to displace him. So at the end of the first night, it appeared to be Rami, Phil, Curry, and then Hadi. But this wasn't a done deal, folks. The judging seemed to struggle because half the field faded while the other half improved as the night went on. You have to give both them and the competitors credit for stamping it through the many callouts. Some of Rami's past gurus have said that his body can change like the wind, and it seems the fans finally got to see what they've been talking about. And Phil has a habit of coming in better on the second night, but he seemed to gas earlier than normal this night, and that appeared to hurt him, and Curry stayed with him the entire time. The second night came and moved very fast, probably to show mercy for the hell everybody went through the first night, but it was fair and respectful to everyone partaking in it. Sadly, an iconic era is at an end and going out with a 9th place whimper rather than a top 6 roar, but Dexter has nothing to be ashamed of, as his legacy isn't malleable at this point. And it was almost surreal to see him out of the top 6, and I'm sure many fans felt the same way. But the organizers made time for him, and the Olympia will never be the same again without him. Hunter's back looked like it could use some more conditioning, but his structure is so solid he can fall back onto it. He finished 8th. He doesn't appear ready to make that jump into the final tier just yet, but it's definitely on the horizon. Ian Valliere came to play ball and addressed everything his critics cited from earlier in the year. He just might have been the most conditioned on stage tonight, and it looks like he got his revenge on Hunter as well for beating him earlier at Tampa. All in all, it was a good showing by him, as he exceeded everyone's expectations, including his own. Akeem Williams was the guy that made the jump into the first tier. Nobody was sure who it would be, but one person was expected to. And not many thought it was to be Akeem, as he has some pretty high lat insertions, but he is just so massive it shows when standing next to the bigger guys. Bonac was able to perform a death grip on 5th place. This was probably the most uncompetitive placing of the night. No one below challenged him, yet no one above seemed vulnerable enough to fall down. Going into the second night, it appeared things might still be up in the air in the top 4. Hadi's exuberance on stage is reminiscent of a little kid, and it even looked like he could move up a place or two. But it wasn't to be, and he still finished 4th. Even though this was a drop in placing from last year, this is still a victory for him, as the field became much tougher this time around. The top 3 offered a 3-way dilemma. Phil wins the back shots, Curry the front ones, and Rami the side ones. So who should be crowned the victor? Many people forget that the quarter turns themselves are scored, as they can give a reading of one's thickness better than anything else. And it's harder to hide any weak parts like you can with certain poses. It was Phil who ended up in 3rd. He sunk during the final pose down as he was moved to the outside and seemingly realized it was over. This loosened him up and showed a side of him we don't get to see much, and it appeared Saturday may have changed things after all, as Curry seemed to jump ahead of him. But Rami's mass was just too overwhelming for anyone to handle, and that included the defending Mr. Olympia. People tried to move in front of him throughout the contest, and it turned out to be a fool's errand, just making them look smaller. My guess would be that the quarter turns are what really pushed Rami above everybody else, as he just looks like a drawing out of an X Factor comic book. So Rami gets to fulfill his lifelong dream and return back to Egypt a hero. It's pretty crazy how big bodybuilding has become in that region of the world, and I love every bit of it. Anyone that doesn't think bodybuilding can grow as a business is dead wrong. This Olympia was nothing short of crazy. It's mind-boggling what everyone in the industry threw together in such an unprecedented year of turmoil. 2018 was labeled the year of the upset, and this seemed like the sequel trying to outdo it. There was only 2 defending champions that successfully defended their titles, and a lot didn't even finish second, so it seems less and less likely that politics play a role in the modern era. While next year is still up in the air as well, stability should return more and more as time goes on. So in the future, I want to do brief recap videos for each contest. I don't want to go super in depth like I did for this one for the smaller contests. It was the Olympia after all. I'm not sure where I'll focus my energy, but I'll definitely keep an eye on which videos get the most traction. You can always subscribe, like the video, or let me know in the comments what you would like to see. And that's all I got for this one, so good luck to everyone, stay safe, and thanks for watching.